Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. It is an honor to be here, and thank you to Adobe and to our hosts for the very warm introduction. I understand that whenever you start to play, I should stop talking. So I'm a little bit worried about having this guy to my left because it could mean the end of the talk even before I think it's the end of the talk. So I'm going to be very careful about that. I wanted to start out by saying that it's an honor to be here in Hamburg in February. I noticed that you had snow overnight, and I simply wanted to share with you an amazing moment for me in the world of online marketing. As you know, online marketing is going multi-channel these days, and that's not new news to anyone. But I had the interesting experience just recently. We had a huge snowstorm. I live in Boston. We had a huge snowstorm. About a meter worth of snow fell on the ground. And in Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States, there's this very interesting habit whenever there's a big snowstorm coming, which is that everyone drops whatever they're doing. They leave their offices, they rush to the grocery store, and they buy everything in sight. And the whole idea of this is that if it turns out that it really is the big one, the blizzard, the once-in-a-century storm, and they're going to be stuck in their homes for a minimum of 7 to 8 months, they want to make sure that they never have to go shopping again. And so this happened a couple weeks ago, and I decided for the first time as a resident of Boston to join the crowd and actually go rushing to the grocery store, which I did. I bought 2 cartloads full of food. I brought them to the conveyor belt, the point of sale. I put them all on there. I looked up at the young woman behind the cash register, and I said, "Hello, isn't this exciting? We're about to get a big blizzard." And she looked at me with what I can only describe as what used to be, before the wall came down, the Eastern European definition of hospitality and warmth. She gave me what I could only describe as the Bulgarian death stare. And I looked at her after I said this, and she said absolutely nothing. So we went through and we tallied up all the groceries. She scanned all the UPC codes. And when we were done with that, I swiped my card in that little card reader. A high-resolution color display said, "Welcome, Rayport family," gave me a bunch of recommendations. They gave us recommendations for dog food. We have a cat. They gave us recommendations for diapers. We don't have children who are in diapers. But as you all know from the world of CRM and database marketing, it's the thought that counts. And I thought it was wonderful that this machine was so friendly to me and so warm and compelling. And so we got done with this whole purchase, and I looked at this woman with the Bulgarian death stare, and she still had the Bulgarian death stare, the Securitas look, as if I was about to be apprehended and taken out of the grocery store. And I looked at her and I said, "Listen, I know you didn't want to say hello, and I suspect you won't want to say goodbye. But I did wonder, after a purchase of this size, did you want to say thank you?" At which point she lit up like a Christmas tree, and she looked at me and she said, "We don't have to say thank you anymore. The computer prints it on the receipt." So I simply wanted to share with you that notion that we are in a very interesting point in the world of online marketing where we're trying to take the big data that companies like Adobe deal with and all of the tactics and strategies that you all specialize in online and marry them across multiple touch points, across online touch points, offline touch points. And let me start then with that. And I do want to just warn you, and this is in relation to our guitar player, I'm going to try to get through a lot of material very quickly, mainly because, as Philip and I talked about what we could review today, the idea was to open the day with essentially an overview of the topics that we'll be covering throughout the day, just to give you a taste of these themes, understanding that all of you know a lot about what I'm about to talk about. And this is about raising the bar. This is about figuring out how to solve those big problems, which this grocery store was unable to solve, apparently, with the best technology money could buy, because it all, at the end, comes down to both algorithms and human beings. And I hope that is very much part of what we can get across here. So let me start. Do you mind if I advance the slide? It is a presentation of more than one slide. So I'm just gonna start. So best of times, worst of times. You all know fab.com Germany, and here is fab.com in the United States. And I just wanted to use it as perhaps an example of what you might consider a best practice in the world of e-commerce. So this is a site that, as you know, started in June 2011. It was originally a gay men's social network. As you can see, the key success factors are those that we'll be talking about all day. They're relentlessly analytical about the merchandise that they buy. It's fascinating that the site is designed around emotion, and you know that emotion is the secret to getting our online users to do what they want, what we want them to do, which is obviously become more brand loyal and to purchase more frequently and in larger scale. They are curiously transparent about everything that they do. They are relentlessly social, and needless to say, they are global, as their acquisition in Germany made clear. They're global, sell in 26 countries around the world. In just 18 months since the company started, they've sold 5 million products, an amazing company. Perhaps the remarkable part of this is that this is a story about a company that is designed to be mobile first. And it is designed particularly around excellence with the iPad, although it plays on iPhone, iPad, Droid devices. The statistics are fascinating, and that is that, as you can see, 40% of members purchase within the first 3 months of becoming a member on an iPad. The iPad is doing twice the revenues of any other device. And perhaps the most fascinating part of this is that their run rate over 2012 has been that 1 out of every $3 or euro that they sell are sold on mobile devices. On Christmas Day of 2012, 56% of revenues sold through the mobile channel. So here's the good news. The not so good news is that Fab is, despite its excellence, competing with countless other commercial sites in our inboxes. And this is a colleague of mine who loves to shop, and this is her shopping inbox. And as you can see, Fab has calls to action late in the morning and late in the afternoon, and they are nonetheless lost in an ocean of other offers and other commercial propositions. So what do? They come up with an alert going right to an iPhone or a mobile device, but it's fascinating to see that the alert is competing at exactly 11 a.m. US Eastern Time with 2 other flash sale sites, one being Rue La La and the other being One Kings Lane. So even moving away from the desktop and onto mobile devices, even using alerts instead of email, Fab.com is in a very competitive situation. And this really comes down to one of the key messages here of the presentation. So one is that in the old days, 10, 20 years ago, you could argue that distribution was scarce. And today, the scarcity in the economy is attention. There was a time when we sold products or pushed products at people. Now, relationship building is what is all important. We used to think of media as the unit of value. That is where we placed advertising, where we placed our promotional offers, was all about real estate or location, location, location. Now it is all about users, and we'll talk about that in a minute with analytics. And the final part of this is that if content was king, these days is context that is king, and I hope I can illustrate that here. That is, content still matters, but it's content in the user's context. So let me then move from here to talking about the 7 themes which we'll touch on over the course of the day today. Is that all right with you if we now move to a slide that has 7 themes on it? And maybe slightly overwhelming, although I've graded them all out so you can only deal with one at a time. So the first of these is advertising analytics. And all of you are aware of the fact that as we move into more and more sophisticated forms of online marketing, that the analytics challenge is becoming ever greater. And it's becoming ever greater for the reason that while in the IT world, big data has been a fact of life for the past decade, big data coming into the marketing world is something new. And just looking at these statistics, just to translate these things into things that mean something from a marketing standpoint, what we're seeing is an explosion of both structured data, the simple demographics, understanding who the user is, where they are, where they live, their credit card number, everything stripped of personally identifiable information for privacy reasons, to a world where we are seeing an explosion of unstructured data. Unstructured data having to do with who people are talking to on social networks, where people have been online. We're measuring with cookies and pixels and so forth. You think about this digital activity, it is producing every single day this number, 2.5 quintillion bytes, which is, for those of you who want to translate that, that's 2.5 exabytes of data produced every day. And an exabyte is a billion bytes. So this is an extraordinary amount of information. We're growing this information on an annualized basis 60% a year, which essentially means that every year, even as this accelerates, 90% of all the data and information in the world has been created in the last 24 months. So a remarkable outpouring of data, which we all as marketers need to deal with. It's one of the reasons that the projections are that all of you as marketing people will have technology budgets that dramatically exceed your CTOs and your CIOs within the next 2 to 3 years. That is, technology dollars spent are migrating from the world of IT or MIS to the world of marketing, which for all of us as marketers is a very exciting thing, except we need to know what to do with the technology. As we think about what's going on in the world of the use of this data, clearly the big headline is the use of advertising exchanges, and on advertising exchanges, RTB, or so-called real-time bidding. Interesting to see that in the US today, 21% of display advertising is now exchange traded. In Germany, it's roughly 12%. The projections, if we go out to 2016 here, are that we'll see real-time bidding grow by nearly 1,000% over the next 4.5 years. And if we think about that in terms of a compound annual growth rate, it's nearly 60% of growth in exchange-traded display. So to put this in a different way, what we associate with something like Google AdWords and the kind of auctions that go on to place advertising based on AdWords, we're seeing move to the world of display. And of course, display is not just static display on web pages, but is display that includes video and will increasingly be part of how we target video through conventional digital cable systems and satellite or direct broadcast satellite systems, as well as video online. So first theme is big data, and I should add that the biggest challenge here, as you all know, is not just RTB and ad exchanges, but the whole issue of marketing mix optimization. How do you figure out how to allocate euro across the various available media you have? Digital media, traditional media, what is the most efficient way to do that? It's something that is referred to as predictive analytics, and it's very much part of what started with a simple example like this, wherein what we're seeing again is a typical news page, in this case from one of the US news magazines, with an advertisement that 10 years ago would have had something to do with what was on the page. The page is talking about a big storm, the storm I just talked about, Storm Nemo, a blizzard. But the advertisement is based on where my colleague, who's been shopping for cosmetic products, has actually been. So this is a perfect example of retargeting or targeted media, wherein we're paying no attention to the content of the page. We're paying all of our attention to where the user's been, where she's going, and what her intent is likely to be. So the big data and the advertising analytics challenge is one that I know we'll be hearing about on a panel this afternoon that will include our friend from Adobe. And so let me leave that one behind and move on to the next theme. We talked about context being king. And what I mean by that is that the whole movement away from display advertising to something that people are now referring to as native content is a way of, as you all know, creating advertising or commercial copy that is as useful and appropriate and welcome to users as editorial content. So we used to think about this as advertorial. Now we think about it as editorial, but it's editorial as supplied in social contexts, in editorial or publishing contexts to meet users' needs in unique ways. So example being, here is a sponsored story on a Facebook feed coming from the Food Network magazine, in which what you see down here is social communications. What you see above here is the offer of a recipe that comes right out of the Food Network that is essentially information or content that is native because it's content that is specifically targeted to the interests of the user. It is not technically an advertisement, but it functions as advertising, and it functions as advertising by behaving like editorial. The uptake of this kind of content is very interesting. The predictions are that between this year and next, it'll grow 12.6%. Over the next 5 years, as you can see, we're looking at a 260% increase in the spend on native content. As we survey media buyers, roughly half of them plan to allocate significant budgets to native content. And this is all about solving a problem. If you go back in time, back to the year 2000, the click-through rate on banners, if you can believe it, and this would be stunning for most of you who haven't been in the industry for 10 or 12 years, imagine a world where banners had a 9% click-through rate compared to today. I mean, the idea, has anyone clicked on a banner lately? Can I just see a show of hands? Okay, one. Two. So 2 people have clicked on a banner out of 1,200 of you. And the current average among users, you're very sophisticated, so you would never click on a banner because you know it's not something, whether it's targeted or not, that you really want to know about. This is the reason native content becomes so important. But today's average is 0.2% of users are clicking through on banners. And of course, Facebook is not the only place where this is happening. It's also happening on Twitter. It's happening on a bunch of publishing sites. This is a fascinating case study that Porsche was responsible for. It was a 24-hour campaign in which they used a combination of a sponsored trend being about the introduction of the 2012 Porsche 911 sports car. I would show the video, but you all know what these cars look like, and you know what they look like when they zoom past you on the road or when you're driving one. But fascinatingly, this set a record for Twitter, and that is with the promoted trend and with the promoted tweets or the promoted hashtag, nearly 9 out of 10 of every user to whom this was targeted clicked through. And not only, and this is in the little green box, when we talk about engagement, it's either replying, it's retweeting, it's faving, it's engaging in some way with the promoted tweet. And the answer here about why this was so powerful is that targeting, again, big data and analytics, made it possible to get the promoted trend and the promoted hashtag in front of the right people, such that this appealed to them, again, as native content or the equivalent of editorial, rather than, strictly speaking, advertising. These are all videos about the uniqueness and excitement of driving this car. They are not videos and they're not content that are designed explicitly to sell the car. Nonetheless, positive brand sentiment was up by 300%. The number of followers was up by 600%. And as you can see, the intent to purchase tweets, the tweets that said, I actually don't want to just look at a 911, I want to buy one, were up significantly too. All of these numbers, 300%, 600%, 75% of video views were driven by Twitter through the sponsored trend and the sponsored tweets. All of this happened within a 24-hour period, which for us demonstrates the power of what you can do with a combination of targeting and native content. So let's move on from native content to the notion of curation and discovery. And the headline here is that we seem to be moving from a world of e-commerce to what some people are referring to as d-commerce. And by that, I don't mean Deutschland or German commerce. What I do mean is discovery commerce. And that is that we're using a combination of algorithmic curation, crowd curation, social curation, and self-curation in order to create experiences that are uniquely compelling, that drive commercial activity. So I bring to you a site that many of you will be familiar with. It's used approximately by 70% of all users are in the United States. About 2% of users are here in Germany. And that is a site called Pinterest. And let me just ask, how many of you are Pinterest users? Oh, this is marvelous. So it looks like about 10% of you are Pinterest users and are familiar with what this looks like. This I just wanted to pause on for a moment because this notion of what some people are calling the visual web, other people are calling the pixel web, is very much where we seem to be heading as rich media, graphics, and video take over the language of what's online. And this is an image of what the Pinterest homepage, for those of you who are not familiar with it, looks like when you haven't logged in, where Pinterest's roughly 10 million users, their preferences are fed into a big data set of algorithms, and their preferences are expressed by so-called pinning images, these JPEGs with or without keywords and tags attached to their Pinterest pages. And what's here in this first view is either crowd curation or call it algorithmic curation. So what we're seeing here is the best guess that the site can make for me loading a page where the site knows nothing about me other than where I came from and what cookies I have on my browser, and is presenting a bunch of images. Now watch what happens when we move from the world of being essentially an unknown user to now being a registered user. So we move from crowd curation to social curation. Now social curation means that I've now become a member of Pinterest. I've logged into Pinterest either through Facebook or Twitter, and now what I'm seeing is a pixel web or a visual web set of displays that are based on what my social network likes and what it's pinned on my social graphs boards on Pinterest. So this is now a reflection not of what 10 million people like, but of what the 200 or 300 or 1,000 people with whom I'm linked through a social network actually like, and it becomes a set of recommendations that are relevant to me. And of course, what this is made out of is a bunch of pages which again look very different, which are a function of self-curation. So this is now my Pinterest board where I pinned a bunch of images, and those images are combined with others in my social graph to give us what we just saw before, which was the notion of the social curation. So this idea of using rich visuals, algorithms, social graphs, and tags mixed with social commentary, because many of these images, as you can see, if you scroll down, you can scroll down infinitely through a Pinterest page, have social commentary attached to them, put Pinterest in a very interesting position. And that is, we look at the efficacy of Pinterest as a marketing machine, as an online referral engine for purchasing. The efficacy is actually quite extraordinary. If you look over on the left-hand side, you compare it to Facebook, and we talk about keeping track of things I like, keeping ahead of trends. When you compare Pinterest to Facebook, Pinterest has an advantage of roughly 4 times Facebook. If we talk about getting inspired about what to buy, it's 4.5 or 5 times as effective. But maybe the really interesting data is over here, which is what is the value of a Pinterest referral from the standpoint of average order value or the size of a purchase. Pinterest, by the way, is not an e-commerce website, but it does click through like a mega affiliate to e-commerce websites where all of these items that are pinned can be available for sale, although many of them may just be images that have no commercial intent whatsoever. But despite all that, as you can see, where Twitter will bring in $71 US on an average order value for a click-through, Facebook is at 96, Pinterest is extraordinarily valuable at roughly $170 on a click-through, which leads to the interesting conclusion that Pinterest, from a social standpoint, because of the rich visual content, the social connectivity, the social and social graph curation, turns out to be a uniquely effective engine for generating online purchasing. And if you compare it with other social sites, including a behemoth like Facebook, which has obviously won the social game and owns the world increasingly, it is remarkably competitive. If you compare it to search engine referrals or other non-social referral sources, it leaves them behind in the dust. So this is something that I think we want to track, mainly because, as we'll see, the web will look more and more like Pinterest as time goes on. You may notice that fab.com, with its fab feed that we saw on that very first slide, is a very similar use, in that case in a flash sale context, of what Pinterest is doing with its own feeds, which represent the pages we've just seen. So if we go from there, the next up that we'll be hearing about a lot today is obviously about mobility. And mobility these days, let me just ask, obviously every one of you in the audience has a mobile phone. How many of you don't just carry a feature phone, but carry a smartphone? Can we just see a show of hands? So is there anyone who actually still carries a feature phone? I see absolutely nobody. So we have 100% penetration of smartphone devices, which is good to see. The averages in the leading countries around the world is about 50% penetration of smartphones. So this crowd as online marketers, you are roughly double that. And the great thing about smartphones, of course, is that you have all the functionality in a single device. A couple years ago, before smartphones had taken over, I ran into a friend of mine in London, a private equity investor, who was it was in the middle of the summer. It was in one of those heat waves that Europe has had. And in London, it was extraordinarily hot, extraordinarily humid. And this friend of mine was wearing a beautiful, warm mohair sport jacket. He was wearing a bow tie, a starched white shirt, braces. And of course, this was a period of time when we Americans were not known for our cultural sensitivity. And I thought, well, I certainly can indulge this after George W. Bush has been out of office for only a year or two. I can be as culturally insensitive as I want. And therefore, I looked at him and I said, listen, why on such a warm day would you be dressed the way you are, other than the fact that you're British? And he looked at me and he pulled open his jacket, and in his jacket, his Savile Row tailor had sewed 7 custom pockets into the inside of his jacket. And one was for a feature phone, one was for a smartphone, one was for an iPhone, one was for an iPod, another one was for an iPod Nano. And as he held open his jacket, he said, "Where else but in this jacket would I keep my digitalia?" So I thought, this is certainly a turning point from the standpoint of mobile devices. Talk about following people wherever they go, and talking about mobile devices being even more important than our wallets in terms of what we carry with us. We think about what's happened with mobility, and just, if you'll excuse me, just a quick trend statistic that I suspect you're all familiar with. But going back only 4 or 5 years, mobile access to the internet was near 0%. By the middle of last year, just before the summer, 10% of all global access to the internet, to the web, was taking place through mobile devices, obviously smart mobile devices or smartphones. We ended the year roughly 12%. And as we look out to 2017, what you see here is a prediction that mobile access to the internet will grow by 13-fold, which means that those companies who are not designing the way Fab is designing, the way some of the other flash sales are designing, the way Pinterest is designing on a mobile-first basis, will soon be left behind as the world of tablets take over. We're looking here at a compound annual growth rate of roughly 60% in terms of mobile access to the web. And maybe the most interesting part of all of this is that this past year, there have been a little more than 6 billion active mobile handsets in use on Earth during this year. That is 2012. This year, 2013, the number of active mobile devices in use on Earth will actually exceed the 7 billion people who represent the global population. I was giving a talk in Milan recently, and one of the people in the audience informed me that the mobile penetration in Italy, in the Italian country market, was at roughly 130%. And I stopped and I thought about, what does 130% mean? After all, it ought to stop at 100%. And as you know, I come from Harvard, and at Harvard we are less quantitative than we are at MIT. And for those of you who are familiar with those two institutions, MIT obviously very tech-oriented, Harvard the opposite. And there's the old story about the freshman from college who comes into the grocery store, goes to that express line that says, express lane, 8 items or less, and drops 25 groceries on the conveyor belt, whereupon the woman, who's a little friendlier than the one I met, looks at him and looks at all the items on the conveyor belt and says, well, one thing is clear. Either you're from Harvard and you can't count, or you're from MIT and you can't read. My favorite is the ultimate punchline is, or you're from Yale and you can't do either one. So we get our revenge from Boston looking at the rival school. But the point being that when I thought about 130% penetration of the Italian country market, I suddenly realized all you needed to do was think about Silvio Berlusconi's lifestyle, and you could immediately understand why Italians would carry 2 or 3 mobile devices per capita in certain classes of society. Anyway, maybe no further comment necessary. We think about what mobile is doing to the world of marketing and including retail. There's been a fascinating movement. As you know, many big retailers, especially those who sell commodity goods like consumer electronics, have been dealing with a problem called showrooming. People who come in, find a product that they really like, figure that it's something they want to buy, but they pull out their smartphone, they use an app like Amazon Price Check, they find out that they can get a Samsung 50-inch LCD set for $200 less from Amazon. If they're a member from Amazon Prime, it ships free of charge. It's a big, heavy item. They don't have to carry it home. It comes right to their doorstep. And at least in the US market, in most states in the country, you also save sales tax by ordering from Amazon. And that means that big 1,000-store retailers like Circuit City go out of business. It means that companies like Best Buy, the leading electronics retailer in the United States, which was a huge success story 5 years ago, is now struggling. Well, this is the opposite of showrooming. So this is essentially the world of virtual retail stores. Stores that have no merchandise whatsoever, but a bunch of images of the merchandise that are designed to be shopped through the camera installed inside a smartphone. And this is a London-based grocery retailer that I'm sure all of you are familiar with called Ocado. It went public about 2.5 years ago in the UK. And Ocado has been doing a fascinating business opening stores on high streets in London and now throughout the UK, which have 1,000, 2,000 stock keeping units or SKUs, individual items. As you can see, pictures on a wall with UPC codes that are scannable using a smartphone. So this young woman is scanning the UPC codes, filling up a virtual basket online, scheduling a delivery for those groceries, paying for it, all using the mobile device, and then leaving the store. On a global basis, in 2012, about 300 stores like this have opened up around the world. The prediction or the projection for 2013 is that we'll see something like 2,000 of these stores opening up. So as we ask the question, what is the future of brick and mortar? We may not be building stores anymore, but as some people are saying, we may be publishing a store. And in this sense, mobility is changing a huge amount of what we do. From a pure online marketing perspective, this is a fascinating example of something that Coca-Cola did not long ago, in which they revisited the spot that some of you will remember.
The world a home and furnish it with love. Grow apple trees and honey bees and snow white turtle doves.
Now I'm going to ask if we can bring the volume down on that just a little bit, and let me show you what's going on. So this was a 30-second spot that aired on television around the world, became a hit. It was requested by radio stations all over the world, so it became a hit pop song. It was way ahead of its time. And Coca-Cola revisited this by designing a campaign that won the first ever mobile Grand Prix at Cannes for an innovative advertisement. So as you see these people, it was called Hilltops, standing on the top of a hill singing this song. What we've developed is an app to run on an iPhone or iOS or a Droid device. And what the device is designed to do is put you in a position to buy a bottle of Coke for somebody somewhere else in the world and send it via your mobile device to a vending machine in a number of cities around the world. Right now, they have covered San Francisco, New York, Cape Town, and Buenos Aires. And what we'll see here is a very interesting example of something that runs on a Google platform called Rebrief, where they've taken a old commercial, they've now done this for 4 brands, and they've essentially brought it up to date with mobility. So that idea that I'd like to buy the world of Coke has now become a reality, where someone in the United States decides they want to send a Coca-Cola to somebody in Buenos Aires. They type in, "enjoy this Coca-Cola." Google Translate translates this into the native language. The Coca-Cola message is then beamed through the mobile network to a new age vending machine. The new age vending machine is what you see right here, which has full texting capability, video conferencing capability, so you can actually send the can of Coke not just with the Google Translate message, but with a video message attached to it. And as you can see, this young woman is walking by the machine and notices that a can of Coca-Cola has just rolled free out of the vending machine. And so she approaches the machine, realizing that she's just received the gift of a can of Coca-Cola, and is typing in Spanish her thanks, which then Google Translate puts back into the machine. And you'll see the translation in a moment, which is on the screen of the machine, is "Gracias, Scott." Thank you, Scott, for sending me a can of Coca-Cola. After all, Scott wants to buy the world of Coke. And an email is then sent as well, which is Maria from Buenos Aires, says, "Thank you, Scott." So now there is the translation. And what do you have but a set of delighted consumers who are now thrilled because they walk by one of these special vending machines and out come free cans of Coke with an individual message attached. And by the way, I'm not showing this, but again, you can record a video and the recipient can record a video back and send it via the machine. So it's a fascinating example of coming right back to the original spot, now 41 years old, and turning it into a reality using mobile devices. When we think about where mobility is going, it is very much around this notion of creating the kinds of experiences of linking people globally, heavily social, distributing product, building buzz, and doing it all through the high technology that is available through a combination of online and offline devices. Now, I don't really know what it would be like to walk by a vending machine. Have any of you ever done this? A vending machine that suddenly spits out a free can of Coca-Cola or anything else? No. So this is a unique experience, and we'll probably see more of this around the world. Pepsi is attempting to do the same thing. So, needless to say. But the fascinating thing is, whoever thought that a vending machine would become the equivalent of a PC desktop and a global video conference terminal, as well as a texting and messaging machine, all activated by an app on a mobile device. So much for mobility. Social marketing. Clearly an obvious one. We've just seen an example of social marketing with mobility, But these are a couple curious examples which I wanted to share with you simply because they highlight what happens when we do more than create a Facebook fan page, more than create a sponsored trend, but actually figure out how to create incentives to get consumers to go to work for our brand. That is to interact with one another in order to spread the brand message. It's obviously, because we're talking about peer-to-peer or social communications, it's obviously a very efficient, from an economic perspective, way to do this. And I wanted to just take you to the UK for a quick example. Obviously, Heinz has been in the news. It's just been bought by Warren Buffett for $28 billion, but that is a mere coincidence to what Heinz UK has done with its line of canned beans. Now, I wanted to highlight the fact that these are canned beans. I can get excited about a Porsche 911. I can get excited about an Audi. I can even get excited about a can of Coca-Cola when it rolls out of a vending machine for free. But I don't know how many of you feel terrifically engaged with canned beans as a category of product. Anyone a big canned bean fan here? We have one. And you have a smart device, and so you're able to access this. This is a great opportunity. So for one person in the audience out of 1,200 who is a bean fanatic, here is what is going on here. On the left-hand side, there's the opportunity to take a quiz. What Heinz is doing is introducing a new product. The innovation here, and this is going to blow you away as a bunch of high-tech people, is instead of putting one type of bean in a can, they put 5 types of beans in a can. I mean, can we pause for a second? I mean, is that brilliant or what? I mean, you've been making beans for hundreds of years, and now you think, my God, what if we mixed 5 different types of beans? So this is the new product, 5 beans. How do you get people engaged with a product like beans? I wouldn't have had a clue. But these guys have figured out that if you create a quiz and you put it on Facebook, and you use a bunch of psychological algorithms and ask people questions about their own personalities, you can actually determine what kind of bean they are and what kind of bean they're likely to like. Now, given that all the beans are in the can and they're all mixed together, and nobody knows what bean is what, I mean, you can see these beans down here. That's very instructive, this little graphic, as you can see. I don't really understand how you'd pick out the beans that matched your personality type or why it would be relevant. But the fact is, as you can see, the gamification, as it's called, of this product introduction has resulted in a following in the UK. And all I can say is maybe this would only work with the Brits. This is something that no other country in the world would be susceptible to. But nonetheless, the British have a following for Heinz UK, and they refer to themselves, as you can see, as beanies. And the beanies are rewarded by Heinz if they invite 10 new friends and convert them into beanies too. And so you can see that this takes on the kind of excitement of a rock star-like moment, but it involves canned beans. The amazing thing, if you work your way up from the bottom here, is that 22,000 people downloaded the quiz or shared the app, as we refer to it on Facebook. The Heinz UK Facebook community added 30,000 users. The exposure that occurred through the viral quality, which apparently the Adobe folks approved of, the viral we got away with there in that video, the virality of this meant that the exposure beyond Facebook amounted to 3 million people, and the exposure on Facebook alone reached 11 million Facebook users. And this is still all about a quiz that is all about canned beans. And just to show you how absorbing this all is, you can see this little tweet here from a young woman who is tweeting, "Too busy trying to get a Heinz bean named after me on Facebook, blimmin' competition. I've missed my train stop." Now, by the way, what she's competing for is a little replica of one of these 5 beans with her name engraved on it, made of aluminum. So this is not exactly a really exciting reward, but nonetheless all absorbing to the point that she's sitting on the tube circling London endlessly, attempting to make sure that she wins her bean. All I'm saying is that the social aspects of marketing, which we think of as very accessible in media, entertainment, consumer electronics, automotive, high excitement, high engagement categories, can happen here with a low engagement category. We go to a next one, and this is an example of Pepsi. Pepsi has done something very interesting, which is for their homepage, they've essentially converted it into a dashboard for social interaction, pop culture, and trending media. And what you see here is the homepage at what is called Pepsi Pulse or Pulse Beta. And watch what's happening here. This is for the Super Bowl, and so it was anticipating the Super Bowl halftime show that obviously featured Beyonce. For if you were one of the 108 million viewers who watched the Super Bowl when it aired, they then switched the page to celebrate the Grammy Awards when that came along. And what you're seeing here is something very Pinterest-like. Again, the pixel web or the visual web again. And what we're seeing is in each of the colored panels on the page, if you watch the progression here, what you're seeing is each of these is a tweet from a user who is using a Pepsi hashtag to get their tweets to show up on the Pepsi homepage. And so what is happening is that here is a major brand that has essentially stopped selling its own product, is playing a game that is, you could argue, all about social content and native content, content that is designed to make any discussions of pop culture inseparable from branding messaging related to the Pepsi brand. And what is also fascinating about this is, of course, this is all happening in real time. So social media listening enables Pepsi to shape the campaign as it goes along. Every one of these involves a contest. So participating by tweeting with the hashtag for the site gives you a shot at going to the Super Bowl or the Grammys or the World Cup on Pepsi's nickel. The celebrities are selected to have global appeal. So this is designed to appeal around the world. And the integration here really comes down to this wonderful notion that anyone talking about pop culture is increasingly, if they're involved in this, talking about Pepsi too. So very powerful stuff. Just the last two themes, and then I'll wrap up. I think that means that I need to wrap up very quickly. So we will go very quickly to the fact that the new language for the web is obviously become not just visual, but has become video. And this is an example of what Audi did with its Super Bowl advertising. And interestingly, they ran a 24-hour voting period where you could actually select one of three endings for the ad you're about to see. This resulted in 6.6 million previews of the ad before the Super Bowl. On Super Bowl day, 1.6 million views and 50,000 tweets. And then subsequent to that, over 10 million video views online of what was shown ultimately at the game, and roughly 110,000 tweets. So here's the ad that resulted from viewers determining the end they wanted.
Look at you, so dashing. Come on. Nowadays, lots of people go by themselves.
No, they don't.
Hey, son. Have fun tonight.
A wonderful example of an ad that was actually created by the followership here, marrying social media with video. And let me just remind you that this is not a game that just big brands can play, but obviously the presence of YouTube channels has created stars, as you all know, out of people who start as complete amateurs. This is a woman named Germaine Santiago who lives in Los Angeles and gives beauty tips. And what you're about to see here is some amazing statistics. This is an individual who's been doing this for only 2.5 years, has 1.1 million subscribers, has logged 147 million video views.
Okay, so I'm gonna show you guys how I did this face. Oh, and I wanted to show you guys my lip combo right now, which is just Peach Stock. This is by MAC. Suck yeah. And then I use this lip liner. It's called Spice. Goes, Here's what that looks like. And to top it all off, I used my lip Inflation by Sally Hansen. Oh, and my hair right now, I have my SK.
So I'm going to stop right there. I don't think you need to see more of that. But I mean, if that can get 147 million video views, and by the way, this particular little broadcast you just saw, within 24 hours, had 150,000 views. So this is how she's racked up 150 million over 2.5 years. Absolutely amazing. I'm glad we aren't looking at more of that. And so let me simply end by the fact that one of the biggest things that we see is the introduction of human beings back into the world of customer service. So I know that we'll hear from Zalanda later in the day, as this is Zappos from the US. This is a simple example of customer service being delivered via Twitter. They have a team of 25 people who are responsible for this. You can see that they are actually identified as real people. These are not algorithms. These are human beings who are delivering customer service. Their average response time is 54 minutes. What's fascinating is they're also doing this on Facebook. And on Facebook, you can see that it's practically a real-time conversation or real-time interaction here with respect to the interaction with customers with real human beings at the other end. So the final thing is bring humans back into the equation. Why? Because these days, at least we're seeing in the US, 1 in 5 customers has used social media to contact customer service. These are particularly vocal customers. Experiences that are really good, really matter to them, and really work. Those who have good experiences will tell 5 times as many people as those who are not on social media. Those who have bad experiences will tell 3 times as many people. And maybe the most important thing is those who have great experiences will will actually spend or be willing to spend 21% more for any given item than those who don't. And so I simply want to conclude by saying that over the course of the day, we'll be talking about advertising analytics and what big data means for the online marketing field, talking about native content as a new way of conceiving what advertising looks like online, the role of d-commerce in curation and discovery, mobility, following users wherever they happen to be, social marketing, not enough just to be there, but we need to create rewards to put people to work for our brands. The power of videos we just saw in the hands of professionals and amateurs can be a very powerful proposition, but especially when we combine professionals and amateurs. And finally, bring humans back into the online marketing equation, because it's emotion that actually drives behavior. And with that, I want to invite our guitar player to remind me that it's time to stop. So thank you all.
Perfect. Oh, there it is.